So Tony, welcome. Thanks for getting on board and having a bit of a chat about your Bathurst experience this year. Being such an unusual year, it's something that I really wanted to try to have a chance to have a chat about and let people understand just what you've gone through doing what you have done. People see the glamour and think, great, there's someone off having a bit of a race up at the best track in the world, but there's a lot that's gone into it, especially this year. So let's have a chat about some of those things that you've had to deal with. Let's just reverse a little bit and work back to the whole event preparation. Very start of the year, you had a normal program laid out, and then all of a sudden COVID came along and changed everything in that regard, knowing that you're not going to get any other events leading into Bathurst. How did that affect you? How did you go about managing that aspect of things?
Well, I mean, as you know, it's been a really tricky year for everybody. We've all had to adjust. We've all been affected by COVID. And on the racing scene, there's been a lot of events that have been postponed. So like during the year, you'd start to prepare yourself for a particular event, whether it be TCR or a GT race or the Supercar Enduro series, expecting, there's going to be around in a month or there's going to be around in, a couple of months, whatever it is. And then everything could just getting pushed away further and further. So there was a time there where I actually thought that Bathurst might not even happen. There might just be a sprint race, and we might miss out altogether. So, but during the year, I set myself some goals, some fitness goals to try and keep myself mentally focused, especially during lockdown in Melbourne with the weather being terrible. Where everyone, especially that second lockdown, I found it really tricky. The first one I found, it was almost like a bit of a break, reset. This is a bit different. And then you get some glimmer of hope that we're going to get going again, and then to get that squashed. And events to get pushed further away. It was a bit of a mental game for me, and that's why I took on some of the fitness challenges that I think we spoke about last time when we caught up. So leading up to Bathurst, I actually got a fitness trainer to get me into physical fitness, but also mental shape as well. And we had quite a big program leading up to before I went away and had to do my quarantine in Darwin.
You mentioned a moment ago about Bathurst. At one point, you thought maybe it might not even happen and that it may just be a sprint round. So obviously, therefore, the co-drivers wouldn't be involved. Was that something you got a feeling from just from things going on, or was that actually the team was saying, hey, you got to get prepared, maybe this could be an outcome, or was it just your own sort of feelings?
It was my own feelings. To be honest, there was not really a lot of chat from the team because I don't think they really knew, and everything was changing so fast for all the supercar teams. They were just doing their best to stay out of hotspots and bits and pieces so they could do their championship. As a co-driver, like I wasn't getting a lot of information of what was going on. If we needed to quarantine, if we, when the date of Bathurst was, whether they were going to race one of the enduros at Tail and Bend. That was sort of on the cards for a little bit. So it just kept shifting all the time. So that's why I wanted just to keep focusing on getting prepared. And then if something did come up, I was ready to go. I wasn't trying to play catch up, and I didn't feel like I hadn't prepared. So the lead up to Bathurst this year was much longer than what it ever has been. And that has been tricky in a way because just to keep motivated the whole time, trying to get up every day, train. I've been working for my dad at his business as well because, as you know, all the driver training work isn't existing at the moment. So trying to balance all that as well, it has been a little bit tricky. But then, to finally get the call and say, right, you need to get out of Victoria next week and head up to Darwin and quarantine. Then you have to drop everything and we're on, like it's lights, camera, action, we're ready to roll. So, but massive build up to the race, bigger than I've ever experienced.
you just touched on the COVID travel situation where, as it turned out, with Victoria being in full lockdown and other states in various levels of lockdown and border closures, the end result was that the option came that you had to go to Darwin, quarantine 2 weeks there, and then you could move across the borders from there to get to Queensland first of all, and then down to New South Wales. So, how did all that come about? Because I know there's quite a bit of talk and planning going on in that period for you guys. Was that something that you had to end up arranging, or did the team do most of the arrangements for you? And was that done? So, for example, getting out of Victoria to Darwin, was that Victoria saying, yes, you can leave, or was that Darwin saying, yes, you're welcome to come to our town?
It was a bit of a process, to be honest, and we had to get a bit of clarification what we could do. The option from Supercars was to they were going to put up the co-drivers from Victoria in New South Wales, probably around Bathurst somewhere in like a little hub. And then we'd basically do our quarantine and get pulled out on the Tuesday of the Bathurst event. And I didn't personally like that idea. I put the option up to the team saying I'd rather come up a little bit earlier and actually spend a week with the team so I can do driver change practice. I can spend some time on their sim with the engineers, just familiarize myself again with everything. Even though I've driven for the team for the last 5 years, but little things in the car change. And I hadn't been fully thinking about it the whole time. So it was just a really good opportunity to spend a week up there and just get my head back into gear. So, but basically how it went down was the team decided, right, you need to be in Brisbane by this time. Let's work back 2 weeks. Okay, we're going to get you a flight to Darwin. And they book you a flight and you arrive into Darwin. You don't have any accommodation booked, nothing. And they say, okay, so have you been in Victoria? You've been in a hotspot, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I have. They take you and you go to Howard Springs, which is like it's not like a detention center. It's like a workers club sort of thing, where they have, I think it's about 2,000 units on site, and they had it split up into sections. So it's probably maybe 500 or so units on the one site that was sort of blocked off. So a flight would come in and take up that space, and then you didn't get the opportunity to sort of socialize with anybody else that are flying at a different time. So you sort of get there, sign in, get a room, whatever. They give you a COVID test on the first day, and see, whether you're healthy. And then they give you another one about 2 days before you leave. And, you get the results just before. And if that's all good, then literally you get, I organized a taxi and went straight back to the airport and flew to Brisbane. And that was it. So it cost about $2,500 for the accommodation, and they look after all the food. Your cabin isn't really that flash. But the beauty of going to Darwin, though, you could actually get out and about within the facility, walk around, do some exercise. You have to have your mask on. But there's a bit more freedom rather than just sitting in a hotel room, not getting the chance to go outside. And, I just thought that option for me for me mentally wasn't going to be good. And then once I had organised that, then everybody else jumped on board anyway. They thought it sounded like a better idea than going to Sydney. And we ended up having a couple of the drivers in the same facility. So we actually catch up, have a coffee and socialize a little bit. So it was actually, the experience in itself was strange. But if I had to do it again, I'd definitely do it that way rather than sit in a hotel room.
Yeah. And so you were able to still do some training and things like that. Did you just watch videos of Bathurst the whole time? And what else did you do?
Yeah, I mean, I did try and structure my day. So I didn't just get lazy and sleep in all day. I had my training regime from Lee, from Reaction Performance, that had set basically a whole month of what I needed to do each day, to try and build me up and then, taper me off just before the race. So he was checking in with me every day. We had visualization stuff. I had reaction lights set up in my room. I was doing a lot of my training like first thing in the morning because it was so hot and humid. I think the first day that I got there, I did a run around the facility, which is about 900 meters. And it was 93% humidity with a mask on. So that was hard. It was hard. Like I was running at a very slow pace and my heart rate was through the roof, just trying to acclimatize to the heat. But over the 2 weeks, I did almost 100 Ks running around this 900-meter perimeter. And then in between time, if I had time free, I would just walk. I'd get on the phone, chat to people, walk around. So I was aiming to do between like 25 and 30,000 steps a day as well, which sounds like a lot. But when you haven't got anything else to do all day, to be strolling around outside and just staying active, because you don't have any of that incidental activity that you'd normally do during the day where I was at work, walking, between the factories or whatever. You're just sitting in your cabin all day. So I tried to build that up with a little bit of, a slow walking around and just to keep the steps up.
Yeah, so it sounds like you made a positive out of the situation that you're in there, and that's great. But also I saw a couple of shots on Instagram and so forth of you with your rig out in the sun and you're glistening with the sweat and all that sort of stuff. So you didn't mind the sunshine, did you, and the heat?
It was funny. It was so hot there that you were just sweating constantly. So in the end, you just didn't wear a shirt basically the whole time. And like Steph would ring me with the kids, 6:30 in the morning. I'll be walking around like normal. And she's like, why don't you have a shirt on at 6:30 in the morning? And it's like, well, it's going to get sweaty and yuck. So what's the point? So I did get quite a good tan while I was there. That is for sure. So I've got a few weeks of tanning ahead of everybody here in Melbourne.
So after your COVID quarantine up there, you headed across to Queensland and joined the team. And while you were there, what sort of things did you get up to with the team? Obviously, you went there with a purpose to get the best preparation and integration with the team because you hadn't had that opportunity with other events leading into it like you might normally have done. But give us a bit of a rundown on what sort of things you would be doing as a co-driver, as a part of a team of that nature of DJR Penske, and what sort of things did you have laid out that you wanted to achieve?
Well, it's just like simple things like making sure all my radio on my helmet still works properly, my earpieces, I've got all my gear sorted. Just reconnecting with the team as well. But they do have quite a comprehensive sim program and a lot of stuff they wanted to go through. So out of the basically the 7 working days that I was there, I would have spent 4 of them on the sim and most of the day as well between myself and Fabs, going back to back on the sim. And they were getting us to practice saving fuel, where we're changing our brake bias on the lap, just becoming familiar with things again. And the way they got their sim set up, it actually replicates the way the car behaves really, really well. So this year, for instance, the cars have had a lot of aero dropped off them. So just the balance of the car was quite a bit different at Bathurst. So just to do some laps before I got to the mountain, just to know what I'm up for. Like Fabs has driven the car all year, so he's adapted to it. For me, I needed to, I suppose, readjust my not braking markers and things, but whether or not you can ask as much as the car across the top of the mountain with less aero on board. So there's quite a big program there. We spent probably 2 afternoons doing driver change practice, which went really well, actually. I mean, considering I hadn't done it for a year, I thought, you'd fumble a little bit, but the fact that I've done it with Fabs for the last 4 years, my seat insert is exactly the same, all the belts and everything exactly the same position. They've got photos of where all the belts are, how the bungee cords are connected, whose belt goes on, because we've got separate lap belts because I get pushed forward in the seat. I need a bit more length in my belt to get around. Just things like that even though we haven't done it for a year, everything was set up perfectly. And after the first day, we were really comfortable again. So you don't actually want to do too much of that stuff. You end up beating yourself up on the bars of the car, throwing yourself into the car, trying to get 12-second driver changes and things like that. So we were pretty happy and pretty comfortable straight up. And but besides that, really just reconnecting, just spend a bit of time with the engineers, and just knowing the plan before we actually get to Bathurst.
And I've spoken to you in the past about certain things with regards to the car setup and the feeling of the car. And the way Fabs has got a few things, the steering feel and the throttle pedal and all this sort of stuff is a little bit different to how Scott has his setup. And so you've driven the two cars back to back and noticed those differences. But what about when you get in the sim? How is that set up with regards to the steering feel and the throttle and things like that? Is that set up neutral and it's just you work it out, or do they tailor it according to the Fabs version and the Scott version when you and Slady are doing the different sim sessions?
Yeah, they actually try and tailor as best they can. Things like the brake feel. Fabs and I run a softer pedal than what Scott does in his car. But it's so similar. It's not exact, but it's so similar that I actually grab my insert out of the race car and put it in the simulator so I can reach the pedals and steering wheel. And it's very, very close. It's not identical, but it's very close. We have sway bars all set up. We have the brake bias adjuster set up in the exact same position. So all that muscle memory stuff, you can really get used to it all again. And then when you jump back in the race car, some of the things that you might have to think about, like changing your bias out of turn 2 or putting it back after the elbow, it just becomes really natural, and you just not even thinking about that side of it. So it's just one less thing that you sort of have to think about when you got a million things going on when you're back in a race car. And I know we'll probably talk about it a little bit later on, but my first session back in the race car, everything felt quite fast until you sort of got your eye back in. So I'm glad that I spent a bit of time in the sim and just get a few of those little things ticked off before we jumped in the race car.
Do they give you little scenarios where something's failed and you have to try to work out how to get the car back, or you're stuck in gear or something, like little things like that? And do they give you practices of how to manage problems?
Not so much. They go through things like, if you get the fuel pit alarm at the exit elbow, don't ignore it. You won't make it around for another lap. You have to pit. That'll come on at this section of the circuit. But things like on the steering wheel, they've got it all laid out, so that they give you like a handout that you can read through, just to familiarize yourself with it again, because they change little bits and pieces all year. So that's probably the biggest thing that they'll go through. Again, just so you're just fully familiar with it. You don't have to go, where's that button? Where's the wiper button? Or do I push it twice? Or what do I do? It's just, you got it down pat and it's all seamless.
It sounds so thorough, the amount of work that they go to behind the scenes. And again, this is the thing that people don't probably realise, just how much goes into it. They see the car, they see it must get built, so they understand that someone's there putting parts and stuff on the car. But there's all this other stuff going on that you've described here. And obviously, this is the overview version of it. There's a lot more detail within each of those little topics. So I think it's quite interesting for people to realise just how much goes into it. It's not just someone turning up on Saturday and flanging around the track. So.
And I think for a team like Penske, all their attention to detail is very high. So they're trying to tick everything off, tick every box. So they might go to a bit more effort than other teams. I'm not too sure, but they have the access to like an amazing sim where they can do a lot of work on that prior to an event. And why not use it as a training tool? I haven't driven a race car all year. Why not try and get me up to speed, so to speak, before we get to the event? And they do a lot of work with that stuff.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And it's the all the accumulation of all those little things that are going to make the results. So now the lead into this year's event, not only was it quite different because of COVID and all the rest of it, and it's not the first year that you've turned up to Bathurst and it's your first race in that car, because last year was the same. Bathurst was the first event of the co-driver events. But this year, the lead-in was quite different in that, first of all, there was the Scots Championship was already wrapped up, so there's no from a team's perspective, you and Fabs are probably going to get given every chance to maintain position or stay ahead if you're in a decent position, whereas previously maybe Scott would have got a bit of priority there. Last year you had a bit of controversy with regards to the safety car period and so forth, so that was hanging around and certainly was a little bit in the media leading up to the event. And then there's the final topic there of Fabs's future with the team, which has again been in the media, and in turn your own future with the team, which although you have options with the team and stuff, there's always that aspect of things. And then added to that is Scott's future, and the team's future has also been in the media building up to it. So there's been a lot of other things in terms of the mental stress that driving a race car and driving with a team is as high ranked as DJR Penske. You've had to deal with a lot of that as well. So how has all that been this year? There's a lot of topics. There's a lot of mental stress that you would have had to bring into this and manage in the lead up to the event as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of uncertainty surrounding the team, and we haven't been officially told anything whatsoever. I mean, we hear a lot in the media, and you try not to read too much into it, but my thoughts on that is, there's smoke, there's fire, and that's not saying that things are going to change or Penske aren't going to be here, or I honestly don't know. But it does play in your mind a little bit. There's no doubt about it. Fabs has an uncertain future if things change. Scott, I think, he's trying to turn his hand to IndyCar, and while I don't think everything's just sorted for him just yet, he's got a really good opportunity to go and further his career over there. And it will come down to what Penske are going to do with the team here in Australia. So until that's sort of finalised, we're really not sure what next year looks like. But my mindset going into the event was purely just to focus on what I could do, what I had control of, try and do the best I could, prepare myself the best I could, and hopefully get a result and let the rest sort of work itself out. I couldn't really get too bogged down in all the politics or rumors or anything like that. It really wasn't going to achieve a lot. Now that we've finished the event, though, you start going, well, okay, so what's happening next year? And you start having those conversations. And being a co-driver, you're probably down the priority list a little bit. Especially when team ownership might be changing, and if it does, then who's coming in to replace drivers and who's going to own the team? Like it is a little bit up in the air. And until we sort of get a bit of clarity on that, I don't really know, and I don't think Fabs knows either. So I have no doubt that the team will run next year, just in what sort of skies, or I don't really know.
And so this year also there was basically no crowds. For a Bathurst, they had a limit of 4,000 people, which is essentially no crowds. And I assume there was a very big lack of corporate involvement as well. Not having the crowds and not having the corporate there, was that something that alleviated some of the mental stress over the weekend as well, where you don't have as many engagements to worry about getting to? You can just focus on being a driver. Was that one aspect that probably gave you a little bit of freedom, a little bit of comfort?
Yeah, definitely. That it was a very weird vibe. I'm not going to say that it wasn't, but probably going across the top of the mountain where there was no spectators, you might see a photographer every now and then. That was strange. It was really weird. But when you're in the car, everything basically felt the same. You still had the intensity. You were still racing the clock in practice. You were still trying to figure out what the car was doing, working with your engineer. All that stuff was exactly the same. It was just in between the sessions, behind the garage, there was basically nobody other than team members. And you could walk from the garage to the truck without, getting stopped or, trying to get through people or anything like that. It was very quiet. They had some corporate going on just above us, but they couldn't come down and socialize with us at all or interact with us. And the fans out, on pit straight there, they were all sitting away from each other. It was quite strange. It really had no atmosphere. You couldn't even really hear them. So that was quite strange. but it definitely did, make the event a little bit less complicated in many ways, because generally we'd be rushing off to an appearance or a signing session or something, which just takes up quite a bit of time in between those sessions. The only thing that we did have to do, we still did like Zoom calls with sponsors and with DJR Team Penske teammates. So they'd basically log in at a certain time, and the media team or marketing team from DJR would run these events. So they'd talk to me, they'd talk to Slady, they'd talk to Scott, Dick Johnson back at the workshop, the team manager. They'd try and get a bit of a picture of what was going on at the event, and we'd do that a couple of times a day. But besides that, that was really the only commitments other than the time in the car.
And we actually did a hookup with Lee Holdsworth in a similar vein, just on Zoom, and we got a few people to sort of jump on for a bit of a pit tour and a bit of a Q&A with him. I did actually ask him to get your autograph at one of the signing sessions. Did he get that from you?
No, he didn't actually. He didn't.
Okay.
We didn't actually have any signing sessions though, so
I thought he was going to wait like a fanboy at the back of the garage for you. Back to the event preparation sort of stuff. So when you get from the team base up in Queensland and you head back down, just on the preparation up at the team, I did also see a social media post from Scott McLaughlin, and pretty much all of the drivers were out at the go-kart track, and there was a little go-kart sitting there next to the truck and still under the cover, no one to drive it. How come you didn't go out go-karting?
Yeah. I chickened out because I didn't want to get injured. So I organised to go out in the go-kart. I thought, this would be a great idea. And I spoke to Michael Patrizi. He's like, yep, no problem, come out, And he organised like a shifter kart. And these things are like mega fast. And around Ipswich, it's very bumpy. And Fabs was like, oh, geez, it's a bit sketchy going there with all those bumps, and in a shifter kart you get thrown around and you're not really hardened up to it at the moment. And he said, maybe we shouldn't do it. And then the team said the same thing. And I thought, if I go and break a rib or something or crack a rib, they're going to go, well, we warned you. What'd you do that for? So I literally pulled the pin the night before. I felt bad because we were going to go, and I told everyone we're going, and then we didn't. So that was a bit of a shame, and he was pulling the piss out of me all day.
Yeah, you definitely got called out on the social media there by him. But obviously then those guys had been a bit more used to the shifter karts and getting around. They would have had their rib protectors and stuff on, and they still went and did it, and it was all good. But yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, they go out regularly, so they know what to expect. And I just didn't want to take the risk. I thought if I go to Bathurst and I've hurt myself, I'll be spewing, because I've literally prepared for this event for months.
Yeah.
So yeah, not a good idea.
So once you do get down to Bathurst, and this is something else for people to, I suppose, get a bit more aware of. You're up in Queensland and you're heading down to Bathurst. It's not around the corner. How did you get there? Was it on Penske's private jet, or was it a bit of a road trip? How do you get from one end of the country to the other?
Well, originally we were flying to the event, and then about 2 days before we were about to leave, there was some concerns about going into Sydney and maybe, being exposed to COVID. So then they decided we needed to drive. So then we actually drove from Queensland to Bathurst, and we detoured around Sydney, and basically tried not to stop very much on the way so we couldn't, get affected by COVID. So it was a bit of a strange one, but basically it took us like 12 hours or something to drive from Brisbane. We, myself, Fabs and Slady, all drove down together. Scott did fly, but only because he was flying to the US straight after. So there's a bit of a different travel plan for him. But yeah, it was just a bit of a day trip, bit of fun, catch up with the boys. And Fabs did most of the driving. And then like halfway through, he's like, oh, I've had enough now. You have a bit of a drive. And then for the rest of the trip, the next 5 hours, he just picked on my driving and just kept pushing me the whole way. He's like, "Come on, oh, don't put a wheel off there. What are you doing? Oh, come on, you got to race the clock and try and get us there a little quicker." And it was bloody stressful. I tell you, I got 2 Bathurst. I was buggered already. He's brutal, Fabs.
Who got to pick the music?
Slady was the DJ. He was a DJ all day. Yeah. I didn't really like some of it. Some of it was a bit heavy for me.
Did any of Ricky Capo's rap songs come up?
No, not too many of them. No, thankfully. No. It was like probably Triple J sort of stuff, and some of it I know, some of it I don't. Yeah.
So once you get to Bathurst, do you spend some time doing a circuit walk with the team and having a look at the track that way? And what other things do you do before you even get in the car?
Well, generally when we get there for the Wednesday, you would do your track walk. There'd be a truck parade, and you'd also have a big signing session in the town centre. And you do like on the back of the car, you drive through like a little parade lap. I mean, none of that happened. So, we got there on Tuesday night. We went to the track on Wednesday, caught up with everybody, did a track walk, and that was about it, really. There's no other commitments during that day. So it was fairly quiet until, Thursday, really, when we had a pre-brief in the morning to, discuss what our plan was for the day. And it's a strange one, actually, because Penske, you'd think would have a heap of meetings, but they don't actually have that many meetings. So they don't overcomplicate things. It's just like, especially for the drivers, it's just like what you need to know. So you don't have to worry about anything else. Just get in the car and do the job. So yeah, Wednesday was quiet. Thursday, we got stuck into it, and we had the co-drivers had a session each day. That was just dedicated to the co-driver. So they gave an extra hour of practice than what we were used to in previous years. So that sort of, it was all in order to help us get familiarized again and up to speed and give us some time in the car. And then in the other sessions, we could join in, but generally the main driver just did a lot of that work, so they could actually get some laps as well. But that first session on Thursday, for the co-drivers, being the lead team in pit lane, you go out at the start of a session, and you got Lowndes and Tander and all these bloody big names on your ass for the first lap, and I'm just trying to work out where the track goes again, and they're putting all this pressure. I'm like, just go around, It took me that first session, first probably 5 laps, just to sort of get my eye in again, and it was happening quite quickly. But then once I went in for a stop in the garage, sat there for a minute or so, went back out, I felt much better in the car, and we had a reasonable session in the end. So it just took that first session, and you would have seen on the telecast, Slady did a couple of laps in the first practice session that was just for the main drivers, or it was an open session, and he got turned around by Van Gisbergen on his first lap. And that was purely him getting out there and just trying to work it all out again. And Van Gisbergen's come up on him at warp speed, and Slady hadn't even seen him, go for a move down at the elbow, and they made contact. Whereas I guarantee if Slady was a session deep into the weekend, he would have been a lot more aware of what was going on and not just sort of wobbling around trying to get himself up to speed. And that's how I felt in the first part of the co-driver session.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned about the Lowndes and Tanders and stuff behind you. I was chatting to Lowndes, and he was telling me how all those big names, Tony D'Alberto, were up ahead of him when he left the lane the first time. So swings and roundabouts, mate.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
so
good on you.
To the circuit walk thing that you would do, who goes out on it? Was it yourself and Fabs, all the drivers and the engineers? And what sort of details do you look at when you go for a circuit walk? And do you literally walk the entire track, because it's a long track?
Yeah, it is a long walk. We use it as a chance to catch up again and talk about what the car was like last year, what we're expecting from the car this year. The engineer we've got the engineering group, we've got the drivers, we've got the team manager, basically anybody that's in communication with the team during the weekend, other than probably the mechanics because they're busy working. They come on a walk, and it's good for them to familiarize themselves with the circuit as well. So if you say, oh, there's a crash at the cutting, everybody knows that that's early in the lap, or they know exactly where it is. So, but from a driver's point of view and engineering point of view, like, we spend the lap talking about what the car was like last year, what we can expect this year from less aero, where the balance of the car is, what the engineer's expecting the car to be like. We'll talk about, well, is this corner important for lap time? Can you sacrifice a little bit of balance here to prioritize the car in a different area of the circuit? Because you're never really going to get it perfect. We have like a booklet that the engineers give us, and that gives us braking markers, gears, the way we attack the corner. So I'll have a description, pick the throttle up here early to try and do this, or that's a light brake here or a heavy brake there. So yeah, we sort of have quite a bit of information that we take with us. There's some long straights there though, so there's a lot of time just for a bit of socializing as well. So it's not all just work. I mean, I just like to catch up with engineering and chat about what's ahead of us for the weekend as well, and just how the car is going to behave over the weekend and what I should expect and what I should focus on.
That's a fantastic description of how that sort of circuit walk actually, what makes it happen. Because there's, you sort of see some pictures sometimes of the team out on the track, and you think they're just probably pointing here, pointing there, and you don't realise how much that it brings the team together as a social bit, but also gives you some of those details of bringing, I suppose, the perceptions you've built up with the sim and the perceptions you've built up with your booklet with information, and you're putting it out and visualizing it at a particular corner.
The other side of it is, like, if there's been any changes to the circuit, so if there's been any curb changes, extra bitumen added to behind a curb, where there's been a wall change, anything like that, really, that's probably what you do inspect on a track walk. But if none of that's changed, then it's basically just talking about balance of the car.
In those first couple of sessions that you're doing on the mountain, does the team give you a particular sort of run plan that you are expected to go and try and achieve? Or is it, for example, the first session is go out there and drive and just get a feel for things and get yourself up to speed? Or are they straight onto it and say, no, you've got to go out there and you've got to do this, this, and this, or achieve these certain things? How's the structure in those practice sessions? They don't just let you just go for a bit of fun, do they?
No. I mean, they're structured, but they're also quite flexible as well, because, as you know, it doesn't always go to plan, and the car might not be where we think it is, even though we've tried to replicate on the sim the best we can. But conditions change. We might need to adapt quite quickly. But it's quite simple early on, especially for me. Just go out there, get comfortable, get your eye and get a feel for the car. But it then quickly becomes a tuning session, and I suppose the beauty of Fabs and I driving together for the last 4 years is I know what he likes, he knows what I like, and we're actually fairly similar. There's even times when I go, well, I like that, but I know Fabs is going to need more of that. For me it's enough, but for Fabs he'll want more turn, for instance, to help the car rotate a little bit better. So we do go through a bit of a program. Early in the weekend it's a bit flexible, but later on the weekend, once qualifying and those sort of sessions are out of the way, it becomes more about the race program, running the car on full tanks, lower pressures, doing longer stints rather than just doing 2 or 3 laps and then making a chassis adjustment. So it's trying to get a feel for the balance of the car with what we will race with, rather than trying to make a car quick over a couple of laps, because there is quite a balance shift that you'll try and go for. Like, if we tried to race our qualifying car, it probably wouldn't look after the tyres very well. Generally, they've got a bit more front grip to try and get the car to turn. But once the tyre starts to go away, the car can't cope with that amount of front grip. So you got to change that balance quite a bit. So then you go through a slightly different program, even like, your brakes won't be quite as good as what they will be in a qualifying run. You won't be running no fuel. You got really heavy tank, and just feeling what that's like is really like crucial before you actually get into the race.
And so in those lead up sessions, for you, knowing that you're not going to be qualifying the car, do you simply work on race setup and Fabs looks after some qualifying setup, or is it a combination?
No, like in the early sessions, I'm still going for a lap time. I won't run on as good a tyres as what Fabs is running on, but they'll give me better tyres so I can feel it. It's not like they're running on full tanks or anything like that. We've got the opportunity to feel the car and get a feel of the balance, and try and help steer the car in the direction that we think we need to go. And it's interesting, Fab's been driving the car all year and he did the first session. And then as soon as I hopped in, there's a couple of things that he's been complaining about for a few rounds, and he hadn't even spoken to me about them. And straight away, I'm like, well, the steering feels like this. And, there's a couple of little dramas here and there. And suddenly Fabs is like, oh, I didn't even tell him. I didn't even word him up. And it sort of helped back him up a little bit as well. So then they make changes because obviously it's a bit more of a problem than what they thought. So yeah, we work on this very similar program all early in the weekend. The only time when we sort of go in different directions is when it gets really close to qualifying. Fabs spends a bit more time in the car on new tires and really trying to make the car sharp. And then which he did, he made the shootout. He'll actually do some simulation runs in one of the practice sessions of just like a 1-lap shootout, bang, try and produce a time. I won't do any of that sort of stuff. Once qualifying's over, then my focus really goes onto the race. But early on, it's from a driver's point of view, you want to make sure that you're on the pace yourself. So it's important to actually put down a couple of good lap times just for your own confidence. And once you've done that, you sort of feel fairly settled in, okay, well, I'm on the pace. It's all good. I can relax now.
So it leads us to the race, and you got the job of starting the race. There was talk leading it on Saturday and everything that it was going to be a horrible weather day on Sunday, but it turned out to be relatively okay. There was only a little bit of rain. But you did get to start. It wasn't the best of starts, to be fair. And also you had a fairly pucker moment down there at the Chase as well. That was an amazing bit of drifting at 200 odd Ks an hour down there. So talk us through that. And obviously, it's a pretty difficult situation. You've probably done some practice starts leading up to it, but the actual start itself is always that bit more stressful. Talk us through. Was it a bit of you kind of missed it a little and then tried to compensate for it, and then
Nah, that's what I think Lowndes said when he got interviewed, that he thought that I'd missed the start. But going into the race, I didn't actually think I'd be starting. I thought, well, Fabs has done all the starts all year. His starts have been absolutely amazing. And why would they start me when I haven't done a start all year? And then Saturday morning, they're like, righto, mate, you're going to do a practice start in this session. At the end of the session, in one of the practice sessions, they basically, you take the flag, you come around and you do a practice start. And I was like, oh, okay, righto. Okay, so I'm starting to think about, okay, how do you get these things off the line again? And I did a practice start on the Saturday and absolutely nailed it. Honestly, the thing just drove off the line, no wheel spin. I thought, oh, I'm good. No dramas. This will be fine. And then in the race, we pull up to the grid and it had been raining overnight. And there's water seeping out of the bitumen. And we're trying to dry it with rags, trying to pat it dry, and just keeps seeping out. And anyway, so that's what I had to deal with on the inside, and probably other people did as well. But I didn't feel nervous or anything like that. Went through my process at the start. You get the green flag, build your revs right up. We're sitting on probably 70% throttle. Got the line locker on so I don't roll. Start to bring the clutch out. The lights go out, and I go to move, and Caruso in front of me hasn't moved yet. So I launch, and Caruso hasn't, and I've gone, shit. And I've tried to get around him, and then he slowly got away. And as soon as I turned, I've just broken into a shitload of wheel spin. And the thing's just wheel spun. And I've just done this like drift up the straight in between cars, and cars are going around me. It was chaos. And it was a terrible start. But the actual launch itself was okay. But I think when I saw Caruso not move, I've gone to turn and I've probably dropped the clutch and just broken into a heap of wheel spin. So then it put me on the behind the 8-ball a little bit at the start, and I had to sort of calm things down. And we're going down Conrod, and I've got a run on Dean Fiore. He got a bad run out of the elbow, side by side. And then Will Brown decides, all right, well, Tony's got momentum here. I'm going to help him. So he gives me a massive wallop up the backside going down Conrod at, almost 300 Ks an hour. And because he was so close behind me, they talk about, disturbing the wind or the air coming from the back of the car. And going through the chase, even though he wasn't hitting me, I just had no rear grip. The car just launched sideways on me. And then I had like a bit of a tank slapper going through the chase, trying to get it back under control. All that was going on within a really short space of time. And I sort of had to calm the situation down and refocus on the job. So, which isn't easy when you've just made a poor start and you've almost shunted a car in the first lap.
Yeah, that was the chase was a big moment for sure. From that point,
in the car, it felt like a big moment.
I looked at from the onboard and stuff like that. From I think it was Will Brown's car. They showed it the onboard, and I was like, "Whoa, that's!" And even Sarah was watching. She was like, "Whoa!" It was that was a big one. At that point, was your first stint always going to be sort of around about fuel saving? It was focused on that because you actually went a lap later than everyone else. I've got a photo of your name on the P1 again, mate. You're leading Bathurst. Every year I get this photo.
Yeah, we're not bad on fuel, but yeah, I got tucked up behind Bryce Forward there in that first stint, and it's very hard to pass. It was a real struggle. So yeah, we did conserve a bit of fuel, but the plan was for me to do a double stint straight up. We had a few dramas in the first stint with tyre pressures. They were very high for some reason, and the balance was difficult. And then once I got into my second stint and they dropped the pressures down, the car was just completely different and really good to drive. So I almost did a second stint there, but there was a safety car later on, I believe, and it got cut a little bit short, and Fabs jumped in at that point there. So at that point, we were probably around 10th or something like that in the race. It wasn't until Fabs got in the car and there was a sprinkle of rain, and we'd actually pitted just slightly before others and managed to get a bit of tire temp in our tires. And when that sprinkle of rain came down and they're driving around on slicks in the rain, which I'm bloody glad that Fabs was doing, he just drove around people and got us into contention, got us up to second in the race, which was an amazing stint by him. And that really set our day up from there. And we were sort of in that top group from that point on.
Yeah, I was going to mention the rain, and it was a fantastic drive by Fabs in those conditions. It was not easy at all, and mate Scott looked like he was standing still, and there was really good effort. Unfortunately, he didn't quite get on the podium.
Yeah.
The parity this year was so much closer than it's ever been in the recent years. It didn't matter what car you were in; it was actually really quite even. The speed and the performance of the cars in both, whether it was over the top or down the straights, it was really even. Year. So did that make it sort of change the way you had to go about the race in terms of compared to previous years where the DGR Team Penske Mustang has been sort of a bit ahead of everyone else?
Yeah. I mean, I said to Fabs earlier in the weekend, we don't have the advantage that we have had in the past where, you could easily be in the top few all the time. You really had to put together good laps and work quite hard to be near the front. But in the race, it was really a bit of a track position race. And unfortunately, at the end there, we had to double stack behind Slady, and we lost a lot of time. So at the end of my third stint, we were 18 seconds ahead of car 25, which was Luffy and Chaz. And then after the double stack, we came out behind them, and that was it. We didn't have enough pace to get around them. They were fast, but I believe if we were ahead of them, they wouldn't have been able to get around us. So, but yeah, again, our cars had really good fuel consumption, which the boys worked really hard on. And I think that opens up your day a little bit if you know you can go a little bit longer than others. And if you are stuck behind somebody, use that opportunity to save a bit of fuel to try and jump them in the pit lane. One thing we really found this year, though, was the overcut was quite impressive. If you could go a little bit longer than somebody while they pit and then it takes them a couple of laps to get back up to speed, you could actually make up like at least 3 or 4 seconds because with a full tank, cold tires, low pressure, you'd wobble around for like a lap and a half doing 8s or 9s, while the other guy that's finishing his stint on low tanks and warm tires is doing 6s. Suddenly you make up quite a bit of time. So if you could go a bit longer, it's actually quite an advantage. And I'm not sure why that played such a big part this year, but it just seemed to work really well.
And so you ended up fourth, which is it's still a great result, especially in a race that it had a few safety cars, but it was a fairly frenetic pace most of the day. Fourth is a good result, but for yourself and for the team, is fourth underachieving? Is that what would they have expected to have gotten more? And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just they've been strong most of the year, and they've been strong there in the previous years as well. So and just the team itself has got high expectations of performance. So was that a bit of an underachieve?
Well, before we went to the event, we had a big team meeting back at the workshop, and the big goal for the weekend was a teams championship. Without saying it, obviously they want to try and win the race as well, but the teams championship is important for the pit lane priority, and I think it shows that it's not just the drivers done a great job; it's the whole organisation. So they're really keen on trying to secure that. Now, when Jamie went out early in the race, that made our life a lot easier. But yeah, you're right. Fourth and fifth is a really strong result. Some teams would be wrapped with that. But for our team, it was a bit disappointing. We try and focus on the positives of winning the team's championship, but I know deep down they were disappointed that we didn't get a car on the podium or win the race. So that is disappointing. For me personally, it's my second best result there. And I literally walk away from the weekend disappointed and not even that enthused about the whole thing. And I think if you look at it, like if you win the race, obviously you're happy. If you get second, you're disappointed. If you get third, you're happy because you've made the podium. If you get fourth, you're unhappy because you've missed the podium. And then if you get fifth, you're like, oh, well, solid day, good result. So it's just one of those positions where I think you're never really going to be entirely happy unless you come from 20th and you just had a ripper race. But when you're sort of in that top group and it didn't quite pan out for you, and it was literally that safety car that we had to double stack, and Tim Slade hadn't done enough laps as a co-driver. We were sort of one lap out of this little window that we needed, and it changed our whole day. If that safety car hadn't have come, we could have pitted without getting hurt, and same with the other car. So we could have maybe even been better again. But any day where you finish top 5, to beat the other car as well. Scott's been so dominant all year. It is a good day out. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, I was disappointed, and I know the team was as well.
Look, overall, it just looked like you didn't quite have the pace that you've had in previous years.
No.
And it was one of those things that previously you had the pace that even the strategy could probably worked around it. But this year it had to match the strategy as well in terms of where the safety cars fell and all that sort of stuff. So what about post-event? It was, again, it's an unusual year in that previous years after Bathurst, there's another co-driver event that you would be going to. There's other functions and things that would probably still be relevant. But this year it was a bit different. Did they do a presentation on the evening of Bathurst where all the drivers were there for the awards ceremony and stuff? And then did you all just go home? How did what happened after the event?
Yeah, we had like a little gala, like little gala event in pit lane. where I don't think all the drivers rocked up, but some did that we knew we were getting a trophy, and that has a really basic little trophy presentation in the pit lane there. And then after that, everyone sort of headed off. The Victorian teams, I think, were just busting to get home. Some have been away for 107 days, which is just crazy to think they've been away from family and their homes for that long. But they could go straight back into Victoria without having to quarantine. So that was nice for them. But the Brisbane teams, they couldn't actually go back to Brisbane just yet. So they're up sort of on the border of New South Wales and Queensland at the moment in different locations, isolating. So they don't have to quarantine. They have to stay in their room, but they can't go over into Brisbane just yet. It's a really weird scenario because they can't do that, but then they have family members coming to visit them and stay with them, and then they can go home. So I don't understand it, but it's a really weird scenario that they're having to do before they're allowed to go back into Brizzy. So for me personally, I drove back to Sydney on Monday morning and got a flight back to Melbourne, and then got home about lunchtime on Monday. So I was a bit tight on Monday, but Tuesday it really sort of hit me. That was sort of the come down, I think, from all the months of preparation. And then, you look back and go, okay, well, that's all finished now. It's all done. Now what do I do? It's a really weird scenario, especially with no other racing that's going to happen this year. And then a lot of uncertainty for next year for everybody. But it's a weird scenario again. Need a little bit of time off, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And how long were you away from the family?
It was just over 4 weeks. So it's about 4.5 weeks.
That's pretty tough, especially you've got a young family. You've got Oscar, who is 5. Is that right?
He's 5, yeah.
Yep. And Hugh is, how old's Hugh now? Is he just on a year?
He's about 10 months.
Yep. And
I can
obviously
hear
a
him
wife.
crying in the background.
Yeah. And a wife that's been juggling the both of them while you've been away. So
yeah. She's had a big job because her work has been continuing. She's doing a lot of stuff with Melbourne Cup coming up. And although you probably think no events in Victoria are happening, but that particular one is happening. And she's been basically working flat out, trying to manage the family as well. And it's like her Bathurst, it's her biggest event of the year. And then when I'm away for over a month, she handled it really well. Luckily, we've got really good family around. But now I'm back. She can go and focus solely on doing that, and I can take over the reins here at home.
yeah, how's that going for you?
It's tricky. You know what? I feel out of practice. I have to get back into the routine of it all again. It's like, okay, well, as a young kid, like Hugh being 10 months, they're changing all the time. Okay, do they have a bottle now? Do they feed then? Are they still having 2 sleeps? Like, just things like that you got to sort of get your head back into gear.
You need the Team Penske to have a family simulator set up so that you can practice that for when you come home.
Yeah. Just a schedule. Just what I got to do.
Well, Tony, it's actually been really insightful to hear the description of how a co-driver goes about being involved in one of the biggest race events of our season in motorsport in Australia, but to be doing it in a season so unusual with the COVID situation that we've had this year. And it's been really enjoyable to hear the way it's been described. Hopefully people can understand and appreciate the effort that goes into it from behind the scenes, and the fact that even as a racing driver, it's not all glamorous. There's a lot of stuff that you need to do to achieve results and to be a part of the bigger picture that motorsport is here in Australia. And hopefully going forward, 2021 will be a bit of a neater season, one that actually looks a bit more normal and flows a bit nicer and gives you a chance to get a better preparation, and also gives you that chance to stay with a significantly leading team. So hopefully that's all going to happen.
Fingers crossed. I agree. It's been such a weird year for everybody that just the uncertainty, the different life situations for everybody. Everyone's had to adjust and adapt, and car racing's been basically the same. And it's been very unusual, and we didn't know what to expect. So that's why going into the race, just tried to cover off all bases, just in case you were hit with something that you weren't ready for. But yeah, hopefully next year's a bit more normal, so to speak.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tony. It's been a pleasure to have you on board for a chat today, and look forward to seeing you on the track again real soon when we get back to doing what we love.
I hope so, mate. Good to speak to you.